Like Grant mentioned, my name is Chris Daniels. I'm the general manager here at the Lab Miami. What we're doing here tonight is exactly what the Lab Miami is for. This space is kind of our congregation hall as well as a clubhouse, and then around the corner, some of you might know it as the old lab. We rebranded it to the dock, and that's really our dedicated workspace for early stage startups. And a little bit of background on me, I'm probably the least technical person in this room. I'm not a software engineer. I've been building startups my whole life, and then vibe coding came out and I said, where's this been my entire life? This is the best thing ever. And so we had to build the lab website. We didn't want to do Webflow. We didn't want to go with a contractor. We wanted to experiment with these new technologies. And so we decided to go with V0. A little bit of background, we needed to build a website, we needed to build it quick. We wanted to do some things with forms, we wanted to do some things with the Luma calendar, we wanted to do some things that integrated into kind of our CRM, MailerLite, and we needed to do it quick. So I got tasked with building our website. We started from scratch. And so I looked at, I guess a little bit of background, I looked at Lovable, I looked at Bolt, looked at all sorts of those tools. What I liked about V0 is that we could deploy it to Vercel, connect a domain, and not have to kind of worry about other systems. So that's why we went with V0. It was really seamless. I'll show you that in a bit. But I guess to start with the end, this is our live website now, thelabmiami.com. This was completely made, everything from V0. And so we have about 5 pages. All of the designs, animations, all of that is from V0. This thing was kind of the bane of my existence, building in V0, but we got it done and it worked. And it's all mobile optimized as well. V0 did a really good job of making that pretty seamless. There were a couple of spots where there were weird overlaps, and then you would just say, fix that on this mobile view. But I was pretty impressed with some of the interactions that came out of the box, things like this, that I thought were, more sophisticated than what you'd see on like a Wix website or something like that. And then we have a couple things I want to highlight here because I'll talk about them on V0. All of this, and then when we go to, where is it? This event request form. So we integrated with Notion's API so that when this form gets triggered, it goes right to Notion. Our team gets that, and we have automations in the back end. And so that was really helpful to not have to build a ton of different Zapier integrations to get that information where we needed it. And then this goes to Beehive, our newsletter. That was really seamless to set up as well. We used the Beehive API. And then our contact form goes to MailerLite. So these were some of the different APIs we integrated. And again, I'm not technical at all, so I just said, V0, how do I do this? And it would walk me through it. So let's go back to the beginning. As you can see, we were on version 300 of kind of our start of our website. Around, I think it was, the reason you don't see anything is because at version 300, everything blew up and crashed, and it was a nightmare. And so what we ended up doing was backing it up or going to a backup point that we had connected in GitHub, and then forking it and starting new on this fork of it. So learned a lot about backups in V0. We had Andres Espinoza, who's a member, he's a CTO that helped with kind of that process of rebooting things. But I will say that was extremely frustrating. And so definitely as you're building this, make sure you're backing up to GitHub, have multiple copies as you're doing big iterations and big pushes. Because for 3 hours I just kept saying, fix this, where's my website? And we had to kind of go back to the start in a sense. But here's an example I thought might be interesting from that version. The way I thought about building this was first off giving it all the context without having it write any code. And so what we did is we have like a brand kit that a branding person's made, right? That has all of our colors, all of our content, our logos, all that stuff. What I would do is just take screenshots of that. I tried to upload the PDF. I think it was too much for it to parse through. So instead what I did is just spend some time taking screenshots of all of this, of the fonts, things like that, and then said, hey, this is the brand kit for this entire website. Use this for everything. And that was one of the first things we did. And then gave it some context. We had, kind of like a general overview deck. So this looks familiar because this is, what we use then on the website. So we had some content. So what I did, same thing, was screenshot all of this, feed it into V0, and now we had a brand kit. We had some context. We had content for it to then go out and start writing some copy, which we of course edited, but it helped V0, I guess, understand what was going on. And then from there, I really started page by page. So started with the home page, got that in a good place, then moved to the about page, then the event page, things like that. Here's an example of working through the Notion API. I normally just ask V0, like, what's the best way to do this? Give me options. And what I learned is this last line, don't write any code, just explain our options. Because sometimes I would ask it a question like, how should we integrate Notion? And then it would just start integrating things and things would break. And so I found that really helpful to just help it think through. And again, this was a couple months ago. I think V0 has gotten better on that specific design feature where you can grab things and change them and some of these other contextual things. But then it just tells you exactly what to do. So we went ahead and got that set up with Notion. So here's our Notion API here. And then that goes to our backend on Notion. But it also gives you other ideas on how to do it too. And one of the most complicated things we tried to do that didn't work out is we host a lot of events here. And so we wanted to have a really beautifully designed event page. And so we use Luma's API, which I guess is just notoriously awful. And we had this all beautifully designed with custom tiles and all these tags and everything, but we couldn't get it to update right. We even were talking to the Luma team, and they just didn't have what we needed. So that was frustrating. That was kind of derailed us. So we ended up with an embed, but again, that was very easy. We just asked V0, I want to embed this snippet from Luma. You put it in there. Same thing with API keys. It'll just say, put the API keys in right here. It'll store them, all those things. Some issues that we had is along the way, I think it was when we forked over, all of our images were lost. So all the images on the website were just gone and not showing up. And so what we had to do is manually do a copy and paste, upload the picture, say this picture needs to go here, and specifically save this to the project files. That was frustrating, not ideal. I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but that was definitely a frustrating process. And then same thing here on the MailerLite API and the Beehive API. It was just, how do I do this? It told me exactly what to do, copy and pasted in there, and it was great. And then on the deployment, the reason we went with them is because it was really easy. This is our forked version here. We have it obviously connected to our domain here, but going through that, if you've ever built a website or copy and pasted, the A keys or the at keys, it's really easy to do. So we just were able to grab that from GoDaddy, copy and paste that in, and 2 hours later, the site was up. So that was super easy. Some of the other issues I wanted to hit on was using Whisperflow. Does anyone here use Whisperflow? Yeah, I think that's the best tool in the world. You just talk to your computer. And so where's Whisperflow? So you install this on your computer, and then you just hold the FN key, and it'll type anywhere that your cursor is plugged into, it'll type. So all of this I just talked to. I wasn't typing this out. And the reason I bring that up is because when I built this, now they have a design feature where you can grab specific things. They didn't have that when I was building this, so I had to say things like, on the first slide, on the home page, on the title text, change the copy from plug into Miami text community to XYZ. And so changing small things like the copy or what was in a button was really frustrating. So seeing them release that design feature was super nice. Let's see, we talked about the blow up. Oh, I guess something else to think about is as you get closer to publishing your website, like a Wix or even a Webflow, they have a lot of helpful guidance and pages for you to upload a favicon, your meta tags, things like that, kind of a little bit of the back end details of the website. You do have to spend some time adding those things in, like the favicon, like mobile settings, things like that you just have to make sure you troubleshoot and kind of tinker with. to make sure everything's sound. But something I really liked and wasn't expecting from Vercel is the analytics. And so being able to have, our site design with V0 and then Vercel hosting it and then having the analytics was super helpful because we don't need to put in other things. It all comes straight from there. Super helpful. I'm sure there's more complicated additional software we can use, but for us right now, it works perfect. And as you can see, the original site title was working with PDF because I was trying to upload that PDF. And then, yeah, I talked about the deployment. Yeah. We have a Luma API on our, no, we tried the Luma API, now it's just an embed, and Luma has that kind of out of the box. The event request form, that was the Notion API, which was super helpful. And then the contact us, that's MailerLite, so we're using webhooks for MailerLite, so that all goes there. And then this was Beehive. And so, since we were using these different systems, we didn't want to get stuck into like Webflow's kind of form system that I think is kind of confusing, or Wix, or one of those Squarespace things, because we have different systems for different reasons. And so being able to plug in all of the different systems without having to just do an embed, because if you look at MailerLite's like embed a form feature, they're like the worst designed forms you've ever seen. They don't look good. So this was nice because we could implement a form, but it would all be custom branded around the site and the padding and the curvature of the buttons and things like that. But yeah, I would say all in all, the process. Oh, one more thing that we did is on the aesthetics of the design, in kind of that uploading the brand kit, uploading our deck, things like that, giving it context, is just went out to a bunch of websites that I thought were really cool and interesting, took screenshots of those and just uploaded them in there and said, here's inspiration, and see what you can come up with. And so that was really helpful because the first time I did it on a separate project, it was very, very basic. It looked like kind of every vibe-coded website you see. They all have a very similar look: heading, middle button, big sections with different colors. And so that helped a lot to just grab inspiration and be like, here's something we like, here's something we like. I like the way that this form looks. I like the way that this slider looks. I like the way this testimonial looks. So that sped things up a lot. I would say, all in all, building it was probably 3 weeks from starting to actually like having it live with a domain and everything. And 4 days of that was the meltdown at version 302 and getting that back online. We worked with Andres Espinoza, like I mentioned, and what we did was we connected the GitHub repository to Cursor and then troubleshot in Cursor of what the issues were, had it fix the issues in Cursor, and then re-uploaded it to GitHub, and that's where we fired up the forked version that was working. So that was maybe the most technical part of what we did. But yeah, I think that's it. I'll stop for questions. I would say, I guess in closing, that we have a lot more plans of things we want to do with the website, and being on V0 allows us to like think creatively. What kind of other things could we do versus if we were just stuck with embedding something on a Squarespace site? It's pretty rigid. And I was honestly shocked by how easy it was to implement APIs and have all the data structure. And I think now there's even more complex things that you can do. But for 3 weeks, we probably would have paid someone $25,000 for this. And so pretty pumped to do it on Vercel and pay the $20 a month or whatever it is to host. It's not bad, but happy to take any questions. You got one? Yeah.
So as a non-technical person who is dabbling and experimenting and things like that, and I've seen you and we've talked about it, I'm curious, how do you feel that the tools that you have available and the guidance and the things that help you get started and keep going, where are they not enough for you today? What is missing so that people who don't have a background in engineering can get started and actually get things built and go, if you built this today, how do you get to the next level? How do you build something more complex? How you iterate, go back to it? what's missing that you're not getting today that is keeping you from doing more?
Yeah, I think first off, I don't know if it was from a podcast or something like that, but just the idea of working with the vibe coding tools in small components and building one thing and then figuring out how that connects to another thing, right? If you're building an application, I think that was really helpful because if we tried to build everything simultaneously, I think there would be a lot more issues versus building one thing completely and then doing the next thing. And so I guess guidance on how to best use these tools. I know Y Combinator's been putting out some good podcasts and content and YouTube on how to work with these tools and get the most out of them, which has been helpful. But for us, I think the most complicated part was really connecting GitHub and configuring GitHub, especially as a company, we have to have the different access permissions and we want to make sure that things are in the right place. So if you're not a developer, that's like a whole new world, understanding the repositories. Also the forking was very interesting, specifically in Vercel, because I was talking to V0 about, hey, the whole project's blown up, we need to get this out of here, we need to start over with what we have. And the forking, it really wasn't clear what you were taking with it, and some of the guidance was to build a lot of different things and fork and then bring them together. So I don't know if it's an education piece on V0's part or someone else. And then getting stuck. I got through a lot of issues just telling V0 like help, I don't understand what's going on, fix this. But I think realistically having a pretty senior software engineer that was available to be like, oh no, this is messed up, let's just back things up, let's fix this. And they were small things, right? One of it was a specific package that was in there that shouldn't have been, or a specific legacy thing from the first time that we put the prompt in and that wasn't needed. So I think there was a lot of junk in there as I went through this iterative process, and having a software engineer kind of do a final review and put it in the cursor and say, okay, let's clean things up. I think I've told you too, like someone should definitely start a vibe coding consulting firm where you just pay a subscription and I can call you at 2 a.m. and say, fix this, it's stuck, I just lost my website.
So many people have joked about that.
Crush it right now. But yeah, vibe coding support on demand, or just being around other engineers that can help when you get stuck.
As an engineer, building agents, but also I'm hoping Vercel cares a lot about that feedback. Mm-hmm. What could the platform have done better? Like what would you have different in the platform, or would you like them to get from other platforms that you've seen that would have maybe saved you some time?
Yeah, this new design feature that they have, that's huge. Being able to grab a specific thing, change that specifically for what you're looking for, and I'm sure there's a way. I haven't messed around with this because I didn't. This wasn't here, but being able to specifically say, just change this copy to this would have saved, I would think, half the time. Half the prompts were change this specific text, or change this color to this color, or move this over a little bit. And so being able to grab and specifically point to something that you're looking to change would be super helpful. So now they have that, which is great. I'm trying to think, I guess a little bit of a starter guide, maybe if you could start a project and be like, I want to build a website, and then it would prompt you to be like, okay, let's start with your brand, let's start with the content, let's start with this, because I think I just heard that on a podcast and went with that, but it'd be interesting if they had a little bit of templates starting in the right direction. Cool, awesome.
Yeah,
was there?
The gentleman in the red t-shirt had a question.
Someone have a question?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. As far as changing the design, once you select that, how do you go about showing that?
Yeah, so changing the design. So for example, let's get out of design mode. Here, for example, I remember wanting to change this button from half length, it was like small, to full length. And I would sometimes actually what was really helpful is just taking a screenshot to give it a little bit of a pointer. So I'd take a screenshot and say, hey, on the mobile hamburger menu selector, change the contact us button to full length. And so there was a lot of that in the design process, which is a little tedious, but the fact that it worked just about 99% of the time was great. And if it didn't work the first time, you just give it a little bit more context and work again. But you do have to be specific, because if you say change the contact button to be full screen, it might change this, the other contact button to be full screen. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think the idea with this new design thing is that you could grab, for example, well, I guess you'd have to expand that, but you could grab a button and then ask a follow-up on that specific button, and then it'll know the context of it. Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions? Cool. Thanks, everybody.